Today, I'm going to show you how we codify engineering culture so that AI tools and new developers alike can understand not just what we build, but why we have built it that way. Traditional documentation gets stale. Tribal knowledge lives in people's heads and walks out of the door when they leave. We're going to see a slightly different approach today. I'm going to pretend that I'm a brand new developer who has just joined the team. I've never seen this code base before. So let's watch how I would use something like Claude Code to pick up the work, understand the domain, and help write code, all guided through this codified knowledge. First thing a developer does is pick up new work. We have a command that actually encodes the prioritization algorithm. As you can notice, Claude is pulling up all open tickets in the repository. It's checking all the priorities, dependencies, readiness, and coming up with a list of cards I can pick up. Allows the user to select the card. I'm going to go ahead and do now. And it then goes ahead and actually assigns the card to me so that I can get started with it. The card itself follows a certain template, which has different sections which get detailed out. These are useful for both humans as well as AI tools to read through and understand the exact piece of work that we're trying to do. The template you had seen actually comes from the Claude.md file, which actually talks about the different sections, what they mean, and how they need to be filled out. First, let's understand what the system is. I could read the documentation for an hour. I could just ask. Notice Claude is reading from overview document under the docs directory. This isn't magic. We wrote the documentation specifically for AI consumption. It's dense, it's factual, and it's well structured and made available to Claude so that it can consume it on demand only when it needs it. I'm building email verification which changes the customer status. Let me understand the customer lifecycle. Claude just explained pending verification, active and suspended statuses, the full lifecycle. This came from the customer.md file under context documents and domain. These are business rules encoded as documentation. The card mentions KYC. I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure what it means in this context. That answer came from our glossary, which is under docs context glossary.md. We maintain a ubiquitous language. Every domain term is defined once. Claude knows it, and new developers can learn it too. And our code uses the exact same terms. Here's the powerful part. I don't want to know just what we built. I want to know why. Why is this repository a modular monolith instead of being microservices? That answer came from an architectural decision record, ADR 001. It explains the context, the decision, and the trade-offs, both the positive and the negative consequences. Last question before I start coding. What does a good test look like here? Every team has different standards, and this is important for me to know so that I can start my development work. TDD, Ken Peck's rules, Uncle Bob's 3 laws, a bunch of different policies are all written in here. This is our engineering culture written down, not just in someone's head, it's in the repository. We also talk about things like AAA. The ACT section must be a single line. This is a very specific convention. When I write tests, Claude will follow this. When new developers join, they will also learn this. This, alongside conversations, is how engineering culture persists. Now that I understand our domain and our standards, let's start development. For that, we have another slash command that guides us through the TDD workflow. Watch Claude ask design questions before writing any code. This is intentional. We don't want the AI to just generate random code. We want AI that thinks first. Answer few of these questions naturally or tell Claude to use sensibility false. Now watch the TDD cycle. First, a failing test. Look at the test name now. That's our naming convention from the conventions.md file. Claude followed it automatically because it was well documented. Also notice the structure: arrange, act, and assert. Three sections separated clearly by blank lines. The act is a single line, and that's the standard that we wanted to maintain. Notice that the implementation didn't move forward until a red was confirmed. If it wasn't, that's a red flag, and the implementation stop and ask the user for what it should do next. Now that you are in sort of the red state, the green, you can move to green. So an implementation will now be made, the minimum implementation to get this test to pass. We're not over-engineering this. We're using Yagni, another principle that's in the conventions.md file. If you notice the end of the to-do list, we have a task there to update the context documentation before we close the story. Here is where most teams fail. They write code, but they forget to update the documentation. Now, because we're grooming using a template, we consistently make sure that we always have a task to update the documentation before we close the card. If a dev ends up executing a story manually and forgets to update the context correctly, we do have a slash command which is available, which will take care of this task. Run slash update context. This looks at the last 5 changes that we made, the recent diff, which has not been committed yet, and the recent stories which have been closed. Analyzes all of this to try to identify what pieces of documentation are now out of sync and not up to date. And then it'll go ahead and make those changes and make sure the documentation is up to date. Let me recap what you just saw. You have codified workflows like slash pickup to select the correct piece of work next and prioritize that. And this isn't something in someone's head, but it is codified in the repository itself. Domain knowledge, decision history, and engineering culture similarly are also written inside the repository and made available to both developers as well as AI-based tools. You are forcing documentation by means of a story template as well as commands such as update context to make sure the documentation always remains in sync. Because if you don't have the right context provided to these AI tools, they will not be able to do some of the amazing things that they're able to execute.